Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to What the Fuck Are We Doing? I'm Randy.
And I'm Miranda.
Happy fucking Monday. We're back, and this topic is interesting. I'm
Yeah.
not surprised that we're talking about it,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, I kind of am. Just because this is something like, I don't want to say, yeah, we kind of talk about it a lot more recently
Yeah. Like
because
more
it's been
so
like
in this season than
of
the
like, yeah,
first.
definitely. We didn't talk about it in the first season. I think that was because we were still trying to get like the feel of like how comfortable,
Yeah, and
not
like we
comfortable, but
didn't
like
know what.
how open we wanted to be about
Yeah.
certain things.
Well, and like I was just telling you yesterday, like our families like follow us on
Oh yeah.
Instagram and like listen to the. I don't even care anymore, but
Yeah. I'm
here
at
we
this
are.
point where it's like if they've heard, I mean, we haven't even talked about anything bad. Like this is just our live. Like I feel like
The only things that I've said about myself is like that I went through like horror phases, and like I'll tell anybody that. Like that's fine.
that's what I'm saying. Like I think it's so funny how like we've even mentioned in probably I think episodes like when the year first started this year and even last season where we're like we're just 100% like unapologetically like ourselves. Like
Yeah.
that's the whole point of this, and I feel like if you've listened to season 1 and like you're here now with us with season 2, thank you if you are. But I feel like you could just notice how more comfortable we are.
Yeah, and like people that listen that are like our friends have said that to us
Oh
too.
yes, and I love it.
So I
But
just yeah.
the topic today, guys, we're talking about sex.
Mhm.
And I feel like that's just so like vague. Like that could mean so many things. But today we're focusing specifically on how like sexualized things are nowadays. And I
Mhm.
hate to say like nowadays, but like personally that's what we think. Like things
Yeah.
are very very sexualized now, and we want to talk about it.
Yeah. I'm gonna drink my Starbucks this whole time. I hope
Oh,
no
it's
one's
okay.
like
I
bothered by
have
that. Um,
my tea.
what was I gonna say? What was I gonna say? Yeah, I mean, well, we kind of started talking about this yesterday. We always like FaceTime to figure out what we want to like talk about.
Discuss, yeah.
And we kind of are just gonna have like an open discussion about it and just see where it takes us.
Yeah, like kind of how it always is, but
Yeah.
this one's like a little bit more lenient. Like we do take notes, guys, just so you
Mhm.
know. Like this is not scripted if you haven't been able to like catch on to that.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think so we don't steer off the direction of like not talking about things being sexualized and getting into like deeper things. Like that's why we kind of just want it to be open discussion,
Yeah.
cuz like
We're not like trying to reveal like our whole lives on here.
exactly. Like we're just specifically today talking about whether or not we think things are very sexualized now,
Yeah.
why that is, and how we feel about it. So, Miranda, how did I don't want to say how did this topic like come to light for us because this is something
Sure.
we typically talk about, but I'm trying to think exactly what was it recently that kind of like made us like
Well,
cuz we've been talking
oh,
about sex a lot more
we
recently.
have the other day I was like listening to um one of my favorite podcasts, Girls Gotta Eat, and they like did an episode with this girl that was asexual. And I was telling Randy, I was like, this is like listening to this girl, it's so crazy because she's like saying all these things, right? That and like you don't know these things if you're not somebody that's asexual. And what else did I say she was like aromantic or
A
something?
romantic, yes.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
I didn't know
So
either.
I had no idea, but I'm like listening to her explain all this stuff, and she was talking about like just, how society is. And she's like, so many people think that she's like, what I love about being asexual is that my sexuality doesn't stem from other people. Like, she's like, and it's not
Wow,
for
clap for
men.
her.
I
Honestly,
know.
like
I was like, oh. And she's like, it's not for men and it's not for women. Like, it's mine. Like, it's for
yeah.
me. And I was like, go girl. But so we started talking about that. And then they did another episode that I listened to with this. I think he's like a psychologist or something, but his focus is sex. And then Randy was all, we should talk about it. And I was like, here we are.
I also feel like
There's like a
we should
fuzz on
talk
the
about
plate.
it because not only is sex such like a big well, like whether it's a big part of your life or not, I feel like
Yeah.
it's definitely there when you're in your 20s. When you're a 20-something-year-old just like us, like that is something that comes out. That is something
Mhm.
that is talked about or not talked about enough, actually.
Yeah.
Like we've had episodes like Lock and Key Part 1 and 2, if you guys remember that for from season 1, we even talked to like a lot of listeners about
Yeah.
in a way like their hookup life and that
Oh
culture
my
and
god, I
how they
forgot
feel about
about
it.
those. That was a
Like that
fun
was such
time.
a good episode. And I think remember like in the end of part 2, if you guys haven't listened to that, go ahead and listen to it. It's in season 1.
Mhm.
But in part 2, I believe that's when you and I were kind of mind blown because we were like reading what the listeners wrote to us and we're like, "You know what? It's so true." Like especially I feel like women we're not, or it's not talked about or shown a lot in the media that women are like, I want you to do this to me or I
Yeah.
like this while, having sex. And I don't know, it's kind of interesting now thinking about how we talked about that episode and people were like saying that's how they felt, and now we're talking about how we think things are so sexualized.
Yeah.
So it's like, how are things so sexualized yet
Women are
it's
still like weirded out about
yeah,
asking for things that they want.
or like not even necessarily like some women are weirded out about it, some are more sexual than others, and
Yeah.
this is like we've talked about it, you and I are totally
So
different people
different.
when it comes to, and this is why like this isn't why this was necessarily a weird episode to talk about, because it's like, yeah, our family does listen to it,
Yeah.
but I mean, sex is sex. Like, why do we make it
Yeah,
weird?
it shouldn't be. Well, and I think like this okay, so this is where we started our conversation yesterday. We were talking about like how we grew up, right? And like who talked
Yes.
to us about these things, if anybody did, and nobody talked to either of us about these things.
Like, okay, if you're listening, like really think about it. Did anyone
Yeah, who
ever
sat you
sit you
down?
down and talk to you about sex?
And then from there, I was telling Randy about something that doctor had said in the episode. Like he was asking the host, like, did you grow up in a sex positive or a sex negative or like a sex avoidant
See, like
house?
I didn't even know those were terms.
I didn't either. Like, but I was like, oh my God. And I mean, I'll share this with the world. I think that the way that I was raised and the way that nobody really communicated those things with me, it's totally influenced like my views on it and like how I feel about it. Not in like the best way, but it totally has. Like and I think that that's why it's so important to, we were just talking about this too. Like if I have kids, like I want it to be something that's normal to talk about, and like I don't want them to
It's
feel
not like, oh my God, we
ashamed.
don't speak
Yeah,
about
like
that.
no, it shouldn't be
Like, not saying that's how
weird.
your family
Like
was,
it's
but
probably going to
like,
be weird to talk to your kids about it, but whatever. Like it should be like normal, you know?
yeah. And I think when Miranda and I were having this conversation, and obviously, like, we hope you guys can relate in some way, but
Mhm.
for me, growing up, like I believed growing up that my family was pretty religious. Like we
Yeah.
went to church, every Sunday. Like I was in like youth group and stuff like that. I mean, I wasn't to an extent as some
Same.
other people are,
I used to do Sunday school.
but like yeah, I was in Sunday school. Like we were in the church, and
Mhm.
my mom, like even though my mom and my father didn't have the best relationship, my mom was very like rooted in her faith. And as a kid, I don't want to say like I was inspired, but like you're influenced by that. Like there's like rules and
Yeah.
got like, things that you follow when you're a part of a religion, like, a religious group. And to me, sex was not something you did before marriage. And I learned
Mhm.
that at a very, very early age. Like not even knowing, I feel like, really what sex was. Like you just hear that. Like you are
Yeah.
not to have sex before marriage.
I don't know that
And
anybody ever told me that. I feel like maybe
I don't even
like,
know necessarily if someone like sat me down and told me that. I think it was just
I heard
me,
it.
like
I
going
definitely
to church,
Yeah.
and I heard it. And like that's the thing, is I don't ever once remember my mom telling me that.
Uh-huh.
But like there was little things like, okay, this is funny. I have a keychain that my mom gave me
What
when
does
I
it
was
say?
12, and it says true love waits.
Oh.
And on the back it's like a scripture about like not having sex before marriage
Oh
and
my
stuff, like
God.
saving yourself for God and you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember getting that and being like, yeah, I know. And if you knew me, which most of you didn't as a young girl,
Yeah.
I was like very like I wasn't the holiest, but when it came to like boys and
Yeah.
relationships, like obviously you're young, like what are you thinking about that anyway? But you know, being a young girl, like I was like, I am not having my first kiss. Like I didn't have my first kiss until like my junior year of high school.
Same.
Like almost going into senior
Same.
year.
I
Like,
literally was 16 or yeah.
yeah, and I
16.
remember like to me it was such a big deal.
Oh,
And then
me
when it
too.
happened, I remember I was like, what the fuck was that? Like what even was that? Like that was
I
so
will
dumb. I waited
never
all
forget.
this time for that.
That's what happened to me too, and I was like, that was it. Like this
There
is
was
what
no like instant connection or fireworks or like you know what I'm saying? And for me being
That's so
someone
funny.
who even though like I don't know, I like to believe that I was pretty religious. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you knew me in middle school, like I would tell people like, "Oh yeah, like I am swearing off men." Like, "No, I'm good." Like for some reason that part of my life like I was fine with, but thinking about it, I think it's cuz my parents had like not the best marriage.
Yeah, so it was
And like
maybe
even as a
trauma.
young girl, like I've talked about it before, like I was like, "Oh, I don't need a man. I'm good." But yeah, like no one ever told me like do not have sex or like this is how sex is or
I have a horrible memory, but like and I feel like I would remember that. Like
right. I feel like I would too, because like that's kind of not. I don't like. This is the thing.
But
Like,
if
I
you're
want
a
to say
young kid,
weird.
it's gonna be weird. So
That's
you
what I'm
would
saying. Like
remember
I
it.
don't want to say weird, but yeah, when you're young and like a parent approaches you about that, it's kind of like that's something you would remember.
I'm trying. I feel like nobody talked to me about. Like I talked to my sister, but I feel like nobody. Like I don't know that my mom talked to me about it until she knew that I was doing it, and then we talked about it.
Oh my god. Okay.
And even then, it wasn't like that. It was kind of like, you should probably go on birth control. And I was like, yeah, I should. And like, that was like, it wasn't like I don't know.
I just remember like
I should have asked her before we recorded.
This is the funniest thing because like obviously this is something you know, but like I feel like till this day my mom, like I guess I'm coming out, guys. I am not a virgin. I hate to
Sorry,
break
Mom.
it to you guys, but I really believe like my mom till this day probably would have like no idea, or like she
serious?
would have an idea, but she would not like. She does not ask me about it. She does not talk about it. Like
No.
nothing.
I try to.
Like my mom has never ever like when I've had boyfriends like and I go
Yeah.
over, you know, like when I lived with an ex of mine, if you guys didn't know that. And even then, like I think my mom, like when I would come around, she would like look at me weird because it's like obviously where I'm living with the guy.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But like she would never ever ask
No.
anything or
That's how okay, so if I remember correctly, my parents we've never like sat down and talked about it.
Yeah.
But there's been like comments like, "Oh, make sure da da da." Or, like,
oh, I've never
things
even
like
gotten
that.
that. Like
and then I'm like, "Do you know how old I am? Like, do you think I don't know? You should have told me this 10 years ago." Or not 10 years ago. Maybe like 9 years ago we should have had this conversation.
but
it's
right? Like why are you making comments
I'm
about
like,
it?
now I'm so old. Like I know
You're
all
like,
the
I kind of
things.
learned on my
I'm like,
own
I got
since you guys
I
didn't
got-
say anything.
But isn't
But-
that like so crazy? It just blows my mind. And it's funny because we just had this conversation, like me and my sister. And I was like, Mom, you have to talk to Morgan. Like, she's going into high school. Like, you don't want her first introduction to these things being health. And she's sitting in health and she's like, what the fuck is this? Like, you know?
Yeah.
And she's like, she's so young. I'm like, I don't think I knew anything at that age. Like, I
And-
was so innocent and so naive and like, you know?
I think the funniest part about it is like how you mentioned like you don't want her to learn about it in health. And I was totally that girl who like first started actually learning like
I think me too.
in health, and I was also the girl who left health to go to the bathroom and walk around campus because I didn't want to listen to it
I'm like
because I was like, oh,
90%.
this is dumb to
I
me.
did it for, it was summer school. And like, I'm pretty sure that's when I was like, what the fuck is all this? Like, I had
Yeah.
I was 14
Mm-hmm.
and no
Yeah,
one
like
had,
what?
like no one
Like,
had said anything. And I
Okay,
think we should teach kids. I think that should be a thing, but I feel like it should be like
But then you have the parents who are like, but then you're telling them to do it.
Yeah,
You're telling them to do it at 14 years old. And it's like, hate to break it to you, sisters. Some people, they are fucking
They're
at
already
14.
doing that shit in middle school, man.
Like,
I knew girls like that.
Gross. Well,
Mhm.
I mean, you know what? It's not gross, but like,
It's kind of weird.
I think you have no reason at 14 years old to be having sex. Like, there's
I
no
didn't.
reason.
I don't think I even knew what sex was at 14 years old.
I hate. Well, like, I don't hate to
I
say
had
this
an
'cause
idea.
I feel like
I had an idea.
I had an
but I
idea of
didn't
what
know.
it was, and this is one thing that I feel like this is why we need to teach kids at a younger age, because I remember like around 6th grade, 7th grade
Mm-hmm.
is when guys, I hate to say it, but they started being more vocal about my mom being an attractive mom.
They were just gross too.
Yeah,
Like, they were
like,
just becoming
like
gross
boys are
humans.
gross, like especially that age. But I'll never forget one time I was in English class in 7th grade, and this guy and this other dude, they were like guys who always made comments about my mom. Like, you know, in middle school when you had like a binder and you had your pictures, like,
oh
all in
hell
your
yeah,
binder.
I made like collages.
Yeah.
Dude.
So I had obviously pictures of like my mom, my
Mhm.
sister, and I'll never forget this guy telling me like I would 69 your mom.
Ew.
And
We were
you know what?
children.
I didn't know what that was. And I was
Yeah.
like, okay, what? Like,
You're like,
Sure.
huh?
sure, I don't know
Oh
what
my
that is. And then
God.
I went home,
And you said
and Urban Dictionary, my friend.
it? Oh,
No, I
love
don't
Urban
talk. I
Dictionary.
didn't. I was not the person to come
That
home
would
and
be
like
like, "Hey,
talk to
Mom."
my parents
Yeah.
about school. But I remember looking it up and crying and being like, "What?
Traumatized.
Like, that's a thing?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and I think it's like so important, especially now, because we were in middle school forever ago, like forever ago.
And why are like I'm not gonna say why are people talking about that then, but like
Could you imagine? This is like what we're talking about, like with how sexualized things are. Could you imagine what middle school's like now?
I honestly like
All of the things I could be right. I'm a grown woman and I'm on TikTok and I see things that I'm like, oh my God, like
Yeah.
And that's probably coming up on little young people's pages, and they're and reading these comments and learning these inappropriate things.
see and
And it's
Yeah.
like, what? And then what? No one talks to them until they're 14 going into high school, and all they're given then is like scientific facts about like STDs. Like, I don't know.
I
It's
think-
so wild to me. I just think we need to, and it's obviously it's like a touchy thing because some parents don't want their kids to like learn about sex, but
yeah.
I feel like it just, do you hear Emmy?
No, I don't.
I just feel like it needs to be like so normalized. Like it needs to be a normal thing.
Let's
Do I
normalize
think-
sex.
I think we need to. I don't think
I feel like
kids
we're kind of getting there, but I think the problem with getting to that point is that things have become almost like, I don't want to say like a free for all, because it's like obviously like you can do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah.
Like, but I feel like becoming like getting to the point of it being normalized, it has become super over sexualized, especially for women. And
Yep.
I'm not bashing this podcast at all because we've listened to it, but Call Her Daddy, that's like an example. Like, we don't listen to it anymore, but like
No.
there's been times I've listened to a couple episodes, but I've mentioned like Miranda and I are totally different when it comes to sex. We are like,
Which shouldn't
opposite-
shock anybody because
Yeah, 'cause they're
I'm
totally different
so
people.
like not like a like we're just on fucking our love languages. I'm not like a physical touch person. It's just not
Yeah.
my fucking thing. And Randy's very much the opposite.
I'm okay. And this is the funny thing is my physical touch wasn't even high, but yes, I am a
But like
very,
compared to me,
yes,
like, we're,
compared
like,
to Miranda,
different ends of the spectrum.
yes, way different ends.
And I'm very cool with it. Like I'm very cool.
I feel like it's a nice balance for us.
I think so too. And I think that I don't know. I'm sure we're gonna talk about this. But yeah. So let's talk about that podcast.
But yes,
and then we'll talk
call-
about our lives.
Call Her Daddy, like, for someone like I hate to say it, for someone like me who's listening to it, who isn't as timid and
Mhm.
stuff about sex, I remember listening to it and thinking, okay, like obviously this is like a top chart podcast.
Yeah.
I see her on TikTok, and I'm sure other young people do, and I have no problem. Like, you guys have heard us on this podcast. I have no problem. You could fuck whoever you want, do
Yeah.
whatever you want. It's none of my fucking business. suits your body, go for it. But you have, like, just me alone listening to it, I remember being like, almost getting the attitude, like, yeah, like, fuck man, like, fuck whoever you want, like, do whatever you want. And it's like, I'm old enough to, like, gauge, like,
Yeah, to know, like, what to take from that and what not
yeah.
to take from it.
And then you have younger girls listening to this.
It always
and they're
blew
like,
my mind that young girls listen to that. Like, high school girls.
That's why, too, I'm like, yeah, like.
Well, the crazy thing with that, too, right, is if I'm sure a lot of people have listened to that. It was a huge fucking podcast. I'm sure some people still do. Think about very young girls, right, that are so impressionable. Yes. Not even just them, but then think about, like, grown women that aren't that way, that aren't super sexual, that aren't into those things, and then those girls were making them feel like shit about it.
And then they're like questioning themselves, like,
yeah,
oh my God,
if you don't do this or you don't do that, he's gonna leave you.
If you don't do what's the thing she calls, like, sucking dick?
Oh my God,
it's like the guac something.
I know what you're fucking talking about.
She calls like sucking dick, like, she like refers to like sucking dick a certain way, and I'm like,
and she,
which is no problem at all, but I'm like, there's young girls listening to this, and they're probably thinking, if I can't stick this dude's thing all the way, if it's even big enough, and do all these things, if it's even big enough, it could even reach.
He's not gonna want to be.
Yeah, like, he's just gonna. He's gonna get rid of me.
It's so funny because I listened to that for a long time because I thought they were funny. Like, I was like, this is so fun. And I was just like,
you're how I found out about it.
Yeah, I would like listen to it while I was at work, like just laughing. And then slowly I was like, this is not okay. Like, because I was like, this is so not who I am. Like, all these wild things like, that's just not who I am. And I remember being like, fuck, am I supposed to be like that? Like, are these the things I'm supposed to be doing and I'm supposed to want to do? And then I was like, no, like, this is fucked. And I feel like they so many times would make, like, that was their intention, to like make girls feel like, if you're not going to do this, then what kind of woman are you, or what kind of like partner are you, and like all these
it's like they started like this huge girl gang just based around that, which, like, there's no whatever, there's no problem with it. You could do whatever the fuck you want, it's your life. But my thing is, like, for girls like Morgan, who are like just getting on social media. And a big thing, I think personally, that ties with this now is, not only are these kids like super impressionable, I mean, I know people my age and older who are super impressionable by people on the fucking internet. Like, I know plenty of people.
There's some people that are just that way,
who are like so up actors and actresses asses, or influencers, like the whole Kardashian thing. Like, that to me is scary. Like, it is pretty terrifying, because obviously, like, I'm not going to say that I don't fall into trends or certain things, but like, we've talked about it, how girls like see all these Instagram like models and they're like, why don't I look like that? And then they want to do those things. And then you have people like Alex, the host of Call Her Daddy, which, like, I have no problem with. She could do whatever. She's like getting her bag. Good for her.
She's rich.
But like, you follow her Instagram if you're a young girl and you come across it and you see her lifestyle and you're like, wow, I want that. And then you go and listen to Call Her Daddy, and you are finding out that the reason why she got this lifestyle is because she's doing X, Y, and Z. Like, you know?
I just, like, and it's so
funny. I
funny.
feel like it's hard to talk about, but I feel like, especially now, like, that podcast and everything being over-sexualized, it's like, that's not the reason why everything's over-sexualized. I just think, like, when I was young, I mean, this podcast wasn't around when I was younger, but it's so big now. Like, imagine if I was younger and I was listening to it now. I think I would be impressioned. Like, I would probably fall into
you would think it. Like, these are the things I have to do. Like,
because, like, I was telling Miranda yesterday when we were talking about this, like, I remember when, like, sex first, like, become, I guess, a bigger deal in my life, like, when I got a boyfriend and stuff. I was like, oh, like, I guess I just learned, or I thought over time, like, this is what they want, and they're going to want it all the time. So you got to give it to them whenever they want it, because if not, they're not going to like you anymore. Like,
isn't that crazy?
I really, like, it's so fucked, but I feel like, I mean, that's what I thought as a young girl.
I don't know that
I'm not saying I was going out and giving it to anyone,
No,
but I'm just
no,
saying,
that's
like,
just where
I
your
really thought, like,
headspace was.
yeah, like,
I
if
think that I
I
probably
can't do
thought,
X, Y, and Z,
yeah, I think I
why are
thought
they
the
going to
same
find someone
thing.
else who could?
I think I thought the same thing. And I remember, and I've said this before on here, like, in my last relationship when we broke up, that's what I did because I was like, if I just have sex with him all the time, he's going to want to stick around or he's going to want to get back with me, which is so sad and like didn't work.
Literally
obviously.
the thing that I posted on our Instagram the other day. Like,
Yeah,
you
but
can't get someone to love you by giving them more of
No.
what they already do
No.
not appreciate.
But
So
I
it's
think,
like we're over here, like, I'm not saying this is how we were, but like you're like throwing it back, giving it the
Yeah.
best you got,
and
and then they end it, and then
They
you're
don't
like, I'm
care.
gonna keep doing it, and then they're like, I still don't want you, and you're like,
you're like, but I tried so hard.
but why is the math not adding up? And it's like, clearly,
That's literally how I was though, and it's like sad. But I was young,
I think
and
that's so many. Like, I want to say we've all been there.
I think we have. I think everybody has. Like, you're pulling out everything you can to be like, is this gonna work? Is that gonna work? And I think that that's where my like not issues, but like I feel like I'm just very jaded from that part of my life, and I think that it's put like a really interesting spin on how I viewed sex since then.
Cue Jaded by Drake playing in the background. Just kidding.
But like I really think so. And like after that phase of my life, I went into the phase of like, let me just get drunk and hook up with people. And I'd wake up and be like, what the fuck did I do? And like then I went through that terrible phase. And now I have a
Because it was
boyfriend.
like guilt. You're
Yeah.
feeling guilt.
And I was like trying to like fill a void, which didn't work. So I think that I'm just like, this is why I'm in therapy, guys. I think that and I think this happens to a lot of people too, is like you start off one way, like you're young and impressionable and you have sex with somebody you love, and then that like feeling and all that thing is like shattered, and you're like, fuck.
You're like, it's science.
You're
it's
like,
science.
It's the fucking chemicals. I haven't said that in so long.
Yes, it's science.
But it really is. And I think that that's like so many people develop issues with sex or like just with intimacy and like vulnerability because of that.
Yes.
And I think if you don't address it, like it's just gonna,
it will manifest into something.
this is why I'm in therapy, people. This is why. Because if you do things in your life and you carry guilt, you're gonna have to go to therapy. Like me.
I think everyone needs to go to therapy.
I do.
But
I really fucking
yeah,
do.
that's
We've
like
said
one
this.
major reason.
Yeah.
I think. Where was I gonna go with this? I was like, everything you just said was just so on point, and I'm like, what was I going to say after that?
I also remember feeling, and I'll just keep talking until you.
I remember what I was gonna say. For me, we've talked about in previous episodes, but like I say, people have taken advantage of me, and I hope you guys know what I'm referring to, because I just don't want to say it straight up. But people, I like hate to say people because sadly it has been more than one, but people have taken advantage of me. And I remember after the first time it ever happened to me, I lost, as one does, you like lose your sense of self, and you feel so guilty and shameful because it's like, what did I do to get that to happen to me? Mm-hmm. And I remember after that happened to me a couple of years ago, it's different for everyone, but in my head, I was just like, I need to, like, I know you can't say I need to get this person like out of my body, but it was like, I don't want them in my body. Like, I don't want this to be the last person in my body. And I mean, for me, it was something I struggled with because it was just like, oh, like, should I just go out and like, if I meet someone, like, do it just because it'll make me feel somewhat better?
It never does.
Knowing that I gave this person permission to do these things to me, will it make me feel better because the person right before didn't have permission and took something away from me? Mm-hmm. So I feel like for me, it was that sense. And then also being in not a horrible relationship, but in a relationship where someone almost uses you just for that, can make you feel so shameful and guilty, which is why when you go and do these things with other people, that's why you would wake up feeling guilty.
Terrible.
Or I would after it happened, like even though it was someone like I really liked,
It's just
like
the
you
same.
still feel so
Yeah.
horrible. Well, I mean, I'm not speaking for everyone else,
But
but
it's
for
like,
me, like,
because it's like associated with it. So like that
yes,
feeling and hooking up with someone, it's one and the same for like your
like,
brain. And so you're like, even if you did nothing wrong, you wake up
yes.
and you're like, oh my God, like the worst feeling ever.
And I remember after a trigger warning, going to say I'm going to be speaking about rape, but after my situation had happened, it was like almost like a year after I had gotten with my boyfriend. And I remember like I didn't want to have the conversation. Like that's something always I've struggled with, like when it comes to relationships. I'm very vulnerable and I want people to know everything about me so they could understand where I'm coming from and why I do things the way I do. And I just remember one day I was like with my boyfriend at the time, and I like broke down, like crying, like while we were about to do stuff. And I was like, I can't, like literally, and I explained to him like the whole rape situation and everything. And he's like, oh my gosh, like you should have told me that, like, you know. And to me, like even at, like that was someone I loved and wanted to be with, like I couldn't, like I felt so guilty and ugly and horrible and gross. And it's just like,
it's just so crazy how like
I felt bad. I remember feeling bad because I was like, I should be able to do these things, because almost like they're expected of me, like I am his girlfriend. Like just because that happened to me doesn't mean that I shouldn't be able to do this with him.
Yep.
So I think for me, with everything being so sexualized and, you know, being that way, that's why I think I felt certain ways in certain situations. But this shit's like all over. Like, I mean, I'm on like pretty much every single social media.
Same.
I mean, the main popular ones like Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. And I know, even though I like sex, like I'm not weird about it or whatever you want to say, like I see shit on fucking Twitter all day long, whether people liked it or it's like, we think you might like this. And I'm just like, whoa, like I have no problem with you doing that in the bedroom. Like you could do whatever you want. But yeah, and then I like sometimes I'll go in the comments and like see like people that like comment it or like it, and I'm like a weirdo and I look at their profiles and I'm like, oh my gosh, you look like 16 years old, or you look like you're 12. Like what?
I think
like,
that it's just,
and this is how you're learning about this position or like doing this
things
to a
that,
guy,
like,
or
you're supposed to learn like as you have like real life experiences. Like, and I think that that's where, and like I don't know that I felt this way. I guess maybe I did. Like when I first started having sex, I felt like I had to know all these things, and I didn't know them because that was the first person I had ever had sex with. And I was like, how do I figure these things out? How do I learn these things? Like, and you just learn like eventually. But I remember being like so like weird and like self-conscious. I mean, like, oh my God, like, is this weird? Am I being weird? Do I look fat? Like, do you remember feeling all those types of things?
Oh my gosh. Okay, this is like another huge thing. Like I have always been very insecure about like my body. And for me, that was like a major, I remember I was like, good thing I'm never going to have sex in my entire life, because then no one will be able to see me. And then, you know, and there's so many thoughts that I just feel like, especially like we're so young, like we're still so young. And it's
we really are, like in the grand scheme of life, like we are very young. Like,
yes, like, and it's like,
it's so wild.
Me all the time, I'm just like,
same. I feel like, and sometimes it's really hard to like stop those things even still from like entering my mind, like, oh my God, I feel so fat today, like I can't do this, like, you know, things like that. And I think it's so funny because like you said, even when it's like somebody that you love or somebody, you're like still weird sometimes. You have these moments of like, fuck, and then you're like, dude, stop.
I'm laughing to myself because I'm just thinking like how Miranda and I say we are two totally different people.
Yeah.
But I think I was explaining to you how I feel like there's been, I don't want to say so many times that like we talk about like sometimes it's not even good, like it's not even worth it, like, you know, having sex, like women sometimes are just not satisfied, like, or men, the man doesn't know how to satisfy the woman.
I think about this like, I don't know, 3-4 year period of my life, right, when I was like
why was I faking
had
it?
Got broken up with and then was just like, fuck it, I'm gonna hook up with whoever. not one of those times did I enjoy myself. Not
Yeah,
a single
right?
one. Not
And
a
then
single fucking one. And I would keep doing it even though I was not having fun. Like,
and okay, this is
who allowed
where
it? Like,
this
why
is
did what?
I don't want to say this is hasn't I guess if this has anything to be like over sexualized, but to me I'm like, okay, like at that point it's almost like a performance. Like you're putting on a show. Like
And
you're
for
like
who? For this
Yeah.
dude that you met like while you're out? Like,
or like
Who is
whoever
he?
you're doing it with, like whoever, like
yeah.
it's like why? Like why? Like
What? Like, literally, what are you
I'm at
gaining
this
from
point.
it?
Yeah, where it's like, thank God I'm still very young, but it's like, why are you doing these things when you're not getting anything?
It's so
out of
funny.
it?
And I remember
Like, why waste your time?
I remember
like
that phase of my life, right? And I remember thinking that one, I didn't like know what, like, how to be like, hey, this is what I want or whatever. And I think that's
Yeah,
normal. Like, people still struggle with those things. I still struggle with those things as an adult.
It's crazy
in
to me
every
that,
aspect
to think
of my
there's
life.
people who legit have sex and do not say a word.
That was okay, but that was who I was in college. I was like, I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna hook up with this dude and whatever. And I thought that like because I was doing that, that like I was like the one that had the power in it, even though I was gaining nothing from it. Like I was not having fun. It was not an enjoyable time, and I was still like, like,
See, that's
for
the
what?
thing.
Like literally for what?
Yeah, it's. I think one thing I wanted to mention earlier when we were talking about like your first time and you like don't know what to do.
Oh God.
I feel like, I mean, this is also not talked about a lot, but porn.
Mm-hmm.
There's porn, and I mean, you don't. I feel like barely. Like you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but me being a woman, I feel like I never heard about girls watching porn or anything like that. Like that wasn't.
No, I
a
don't think
normal
I
thing.
knew about that until like my adult life. Probably when I listened to
Call her
some
daddy.
maybe it was Call Her Dad. No, it was probably before that.
I feel like I don't know. Maybe I was just. I don't want
but
to
you
say.
didn't. It was
I was
always like
exposed to sexual things, like not like anyone was weird with me,
Yeah.
like in that way, but like I feel like having guy friends, like me, like having
Yeah,
guy
but,
friends,
like-
like I learned a lot about that stuff.
in high school. To me, I always like you always thought like, oh, guys watch porn.
Guys
Like,
watch porn.
that
It was
was-
never girls watch porn.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember like that's when I started becoming more familiar with in high school because like shout out, like I'm not gonna say names, but like I was friends with certain girls who were very open about that stuff, and that's when I learned about it, and I was like, okay, like it's not weird for
Yeah.
girls to watch this. But what I wanted to touch on, what the reason why I brought this up is because like you said, like the first time you do it when you are young, your first time whenever it is, I feel like guys learn things or like to think they learn things from porn.
Yeah, and you
And it's
we
so
didn't know
aggressive or
yeah.
whatever. And I think that's why, like, when it comes time to, like, guys think, like, girls want all these things or they think it's powerful or cool to do all these things. And it's like, no.
Like, whoa.
No. Slow your roll, boy. Like, you
That's
don't even
so
know what
funny.
you're doing. Don't try to do that.
That's
like,
so funny.
but
I
right?
really-
Like, don't.
it's
I think that
true.
is such a huge influence. And then you think, like, I've been seeing this on Twitter now, but porn is mostly like incest, kind of. Like,
That's like a thing.
they have like categories. Yeah, like stepmom and son, like MILF, like, stuff like that. Like, that's a big thing. Like,
Interesting.
and then I feel just when you think sex and like, or porn in general, like, it's like huge dudes, like huge dicks, like
throwing women around, fucking
yeah, like
aggressive.
Which, I mean, if you're into that,
yeah, you do you.
I'm not saying anything,
But
but I'm
so,
just
like,
saying, like, I
violent.
think at a young age, when young boys are discovering porn, and like doing all those things,
you have to
like,
think about it. Like they're watching that, right? And that's what they think is what they're supposed to do. And then most of the time, these young girls have never seen anything, have never watched anything, and all they think is, oh, I should just do whatever he wants me to do. So then that's all that's happening.
he's telling me what to do, like I need to do it,
and then
yeah,
like that's just fucked. I hate.
I mean,
all of
there's
it.
so much that goes into it, and one thing I regret, I need to ask, like, my guy friends, like, do you felt like you were influenced by porn, like, when it came to, like, your first time? Like, that's something. Okay, if you're a guy listening to this,
DM us.
please DM us or, like, let us know, like, one of the first times you ever watched porn, or like when you were about to like have sex for the first time, like what were you influenced by like the things you watched? Like when it came time to have sex, like do you think they were thinking like, oh, I saw this guy do this,
so
like,
I'm gonna
do you get what I'm saying though? Because it's like everything's learning, like you learn it from somewhere, or
I don't know. I honestly could not
like
tell
it's just so interesting to me.
I think it's all interesting, and I think that it just needs to be like normalized and talked about so much more. And like
why is it like you and I talked about this, and
why is
I
it
remember
weird?
Huh?
Why is it weird to talk about?
No, well, we talk about that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing, remember the first time I ever talked to you about like vibrators?
Yeah, I do remember.
And remember, like, I don't know why, like, I was kind of weird about it. I think because, like, I know how you are about sex.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember bringing it up, and we had, like, a total normal conversation about vibrators. And I just remember afterwards thinking, like, obviously this is my best fucking friend. Like, I can talk to her about anything. But I just remember, like, yeah, like, I don't, like, why don't women talk about, like, why isn't that something, like, we talk about?
Because
like, there's nothing wrong with it.
No, but it's something that it's, like, in our brains to be like, oh, we shouldn't talk about those things.
But I feel like, in a way, whether it means, like, everything's being over-sexualized or just sexualized in general, I feel like that's one thing, like, women do talk about more. Like, I see on the internet, like, women are selling vibrators. Girls are, like, recommending vibrators to other people, stuff like that. I mean, it's not something that we just go out and talk about, but, like, I'm seeing more of it, which is nice.
I don't know.
And then you have those guys who are like, oh, what, you have to use a whole fucking machine to vibrate. Like, guy can't really do that to you. And it's like...
This is why we say you literally don't need men for anything.
You don't need men. You don't.
You really don't.
Like, guys have straight up pocket pussies. Why can't girls have vibrators?
I'm always so
guys have like straight up sex dolls.
That
like I'm sure girls do too. You just don't hear about
so
them.
much that's a thing. Like I just think that's so.
It's all like
weird.
An AI robot that you could pay like thousands.
Oh my god!
You
just reminded me. Oh my god! Okay, I watched this show. This is related, I swear. Like called like My Strange Addiction or something. Okay, and this dude and his wife bought sex dolls like that, but they said they didn't use them for anything weird. They just like dressed them up and had them all around the house, and some of them had like fucking body temperatures, like their bodies got warm like normal people.
I can't think of the name of the show, but I'm pretty sure it's on Vice with 2 Chainz. It's like something about like the most expensive shit.
And there's one about dolls.
And he did one about sex dolls. And I remember watching it and I was just like, people pay like tens, thousands of dollars to like customize these dolls and actually have sex with them. And these are like high up people, like people who have money.
I'm not like shaming anybody, like do what you want, but it just freaks me out a little bit. It scares me.
No, like, yeah, that scares me a little bit too. But I mean, if you're going to normalize sex, you got to normalize all of it.
You have to, yeah. I mean, if that's... I kind of just want to know why. Like, why is everybody can find somebody to have sex with them. I truly believe that.
Like, that's the thing is some people just don't do it for people.
They don't want like a real
like, yeah, person. Some people, yeah. And that's the thing. It's such like a cycle. Like, there's so much that goes into it. Okay, like, you and I were just having this conversation and you're like, okay, now I know like from seeing this in my childhood, like that's why I'm a little bit more timid.
Yeah.
And me, I'm like, oh, like,
I also think, and I told my therapist this forever ago, but I was like, I honestly think that I've like caused trauma to myself because of the way that like I treated my body and the way that I just didn't give a shit. And I was like, I feel like I've like traumatized myself. Like this is self-inflicted issues. And she was like, yeah, that's probably it. That's probably where it comes from. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, I think like, I mean, not trying to be your therapist, but I feel like, yeah, you just like hold and tie so much shame and guilt to it where like you're literally
because like all of these
yourself.
Poor choices I made, like who fucking cares? Like who cares? Which I'm, it's a process. I'm working on it. But I have so many questions about those dolls now.
But
I'm gonna like watch some YouTube videos about people talking about this. I'm
like,
really intrigued.
To wrap up, what are our final thoughts? I'm like, did this episode even tie in to like everything being over sexualized? I kind of feel like it did.
I feel like it did. Okay, well,
we touched on things being over sexualized when it comes to...
I think the key to if we're gonna talk about being like things being over sexualized, I think my, like, what we talked about kind of yesterday is, like, I think everything being over sexualized makes not, like, people that aren't super sexual feel like shit about themselves or feel like something's wrong with them. And, like, I think people need to remember that there's, like, not a normal, like, there's no one size fits all.
It's no one size fits all type
No,
deal. Like,
everybody's
everyone
different.
is so different.
Everybody's different. Everybody wants different things. Everybody needs different things. And, like, that's why I struggled with that podcast, because I feel like they made so many young women feel like there was something wrong with them, or like
If
that they
they
weren't
didn't.
doing enough. And that's not cool. Like, nobody should, if you and the person that you're sleeping with are on the same, like, you have it figured out, then it shouldn't matter. Like,
Or if you do need to have a talk with them and be like, I need this, or like,
Yeah.
I don't want that, like, do it.
I just think there shouldn't be, like, shame, and there shouldn't be, like, pressures to feel like you have to, like, do all these things for somebody to want to be with you.
Yeah, I think that's like one thing about me, even though I was like so against it at like such a young age, because I thought, you know, whatever my reasoning was. I feel like I've become more confident and like grounded, and kind of like, I mean, I'm in a better place now. Like, I'm not, you know, I'm not having sex, but I'm just thinking, like, when the time comes, like, if I'm not getting satisfied or what I want, like, if I can't talk to my partner about that, it's kind of like, I'm not saying sex is everything, but like, you need to be able to be in a stable relationship to have those conversations with someone.
Yeah.
I think I'm all for us normalizing, you know, sex and everything that comes with it. I just think we kind of need to be careful with what we say around, like, I don't know,
people.
like, younger kids are gonna find out shit no matter, like, I found out shit that I wasn't supposed to.
Same. Dude, do you
But
remember in our
more
elementary school when there was someone had a fucking condom tied to the fence? That was the first time I had ever seen that.
Oh my God, no.
I was in like 5th grade, so you were probably in 4th grade. And I will never forget. I was like, and like all the boys were like, oh my God. And I was
Someone
like, what
fucked up
is
with green.
in the fucking blacktop? Oh my God.
Love that. But no, I just think these conversations, like, we can have them and it could be normal, and it doesn't have to be shameful or make people feel shitty about themselves. Like, if you want to have sex, have sex. If you
just be safe and be smart, and
yes.
Yeah. But
and,
I
like,
also
make sure
think
the other person knows what's going on.
And I also think this is something I learned later on in life. I'm all for, like, people sleeping with who they want and doing whatever they want. And if you want to sleep with 10 guys at once, you do your thing. But I think that it's important to remember that you are giving people access to your body, and it's like such like a connected thing.
It's science.
It is. And I didn't know that at the time. Like, I wasn't aware of, like, it's much deeper than what you actually, like, it's not just something physical. So I just think it's important to remember that if you're young.
Yes.
Maybe not even if you're young, if you're old too.
Yes.
However,
and even like there's times I feel like you could totally think, like, it could really have no effect over your life. You know, you could not even remember the person, but I feel like there is, you know, there is always something a little bit deeper that comes with it. So that's just something to remember. Remember, consent is everything. Be kind, be safe, and yeah, talk about sex. Just don't be a weirdo about it.
And if you are, that's okay too.
I mean, to an extent. Like, watch who you're fucking talking to, okay?
Yeah. Not like creepy,
But,
not like weird.
And to young people, to young kids. We're young.
Do you think we have young people listening to our podcast?
I don't know. I mean, some of your sister's friends used to follow us. I don't know.
I hope they don't listen. That's weird.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, young kids are going to get access to what they want to get access to.
Yeah, well, especially because, like
I watched Desperate Housewives at, like,
same.
in, like, 3rd or 4th grade.
Amazing show.
Yeah, and maybe that's why I'm the bad bitch I am today. Just kidding.
Probably.
But, yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, it was. Okay, guys.
And that's it. Yeah, see you guys next Monday.
Bye.
Bye.